What is Portland really like? Well, today we're going to go over the good, the bad, and the ugly. And with me, we're going to talk to a semi-famous guest who happens to be my relative. They are staying in town, and we sit down to chat about everything that Portland is. I'm Tim Jackson, a local Oregon and Washington realtor. So if you are thinking of visiting, moving, or just looking into the Portland, Oregon area, subscribe down below to stay in tune with what the market and our area is doing. You can also sign up for my headhunters list where I can find you the perfect Portland property. I'm with my aunt, Alexandra Fuller, and I'll give a short introduction. She's an amazing aunt, an amazing author. What's another A word? I'm not going to use another A word. But she's well-traveled, well-written. You've written New York Times bestseller, Don't Let's Go to the Dogs Tonight, which I think is what you're most well-known for, but you've written a lot after that, documenting all sorts of things, mostly your life, but for Nat Geo, you've written some amazing articles in South Africa, Chile, I think South Dakota.
Yeah.
You've written a lot.
Yeah.
Well-traveled.
Yeah.
And so we're here in Portland at my Portland home. You're traveling down from the mountains. Yeah. I'm not going to disclose where you live, but you live out in the highlands, in the high desert.
Yeah.
So you've seen a lot around the world. What does Portland strike you as?
It's like a park that accidentally became a city. It's just, I think the thing that I keep saying is the trees, and the soil. The soil has to be so rich; it feels so abundant and bountiful. And I think especially for me, in these sort of climate change times where you're really feeling the demise of the natural world, to come and soak up the majesty within a city and feel the coolness of that. Yeah, I'm blown away by the beauty of Portland. I love the bridges. I love the fact that there's a river running through it. I think there's something really sort of energetically sublime about having bodies of water run through and near you. But there is something about being guarded by these massive ancient growth trees that I think is particularly divine. And I love the fact that you live here with your fabulous family, and I love all my nieces and nephews.
It is a great place to live with a family.
Yeah.
We were down at the coast yesterday. We went down to Newport, and we got to see the Pacific Ocean with the sun setting. Tell us a little bit about where you've been before. Where have you traveled? What have you done in your many years?
I really was lucky to be raised in Southern Africa, so Zimbabwe, Malawi, Zambia, and so those countries are now among the most quickly deforested in the world. I grew up in a time where that Miombo forest land, where there was still virgin forest.
I think Zambia is the third fastest deforested country in the world, behind Indonesia and maybe one other.
Yeah. I thought it was second, but yeah.
You're probably right, second. It's not really a race you want to be winning.
Yeah. No, it isn't. But I think that I've done, so in Southern Africa, Angola, Namibia, South Africa, Mozambique, Malawi, Zambia, Zimbabwe, and then East Africa, I traveled in Kenya and Tanzania. And and Ethiopia, and then here, as you said, South Dakota on the Pine Ridge Indian Reservation, a story for National Geographic. I've traveled and worked in Haiti and Chile, and everywhere I've gone, I am drawn to places and people where there is still an indigenous understanding of the natural world, that we are a part of it. It's not something out there that that without it, we are not only lesser, but dead in some way. And I think all my stories, it's an interesting slim angle to come in on, but I think that I was really drawn to post-conflict. I want to see how people respond after there's been massive conflict, or, say in the case of the Pine Ridge Indian Reservation, just the sort of historic and ongoing trauma of, broken treaties and the wars and so on. How communities cope and deal with that. And so much of it, I would find a common thread, which is nature. People come back to being healed by this, direct relationship.
Yeah. And to go back to one of your comments about people, it seemed like what you were saying is that some people will come in and make a city and just flatten everything and make it their own, and they say, we need to make something out of this. And from what, I mean, I was born in London, and I've been to a few bigger metropolitan cities. And Portland really seems to have created around nature. We've got Forest Park that just banks the entire city. And you were just in Selwood along the river. You're along the Clackamas River. I think in a lot of ways, people that live in Portland realize that nature's all around them, and they've got to kind of grow themselves around it rather than kind of push over it.
Yeah. Wow, well put. That is how I feel. And I love that there's like all these accidental, is it blackberries that we see everywhere? I mean, it
European blackberries. They are European.
So are they invasive?
They're very invasive. They're pretty invasive.
I
know there's two different types. There's the European blackberry, and then there's a more of a rigid leaf. What do they call it?
The hydrangeas on the hikes up in the mountains that are just growing for no other good reason. I mean, the botanical gardens. Yeah, I think everything you said, you put it better than I could have. Yeah, and I think that there is a sense, of an inheritance of understanding around nature. It feels respected.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well put. So, Bo, you've also been around a lot of different places in the States. You've been, I think you went to college up in Canada, but you've seen quite a few of the States. How does Oregon rank, and like what sticks out to you about Oregon and Portland specifically from what you've seen all over the U.S.?
The abundance. It just feels deep and rich and abundant and green. And I keep coming back to the trees. In Wisconsin, and once you hit that rich, amazing Mississippi, Valley Delta, and the richness there, it's comparable to that richness, except that here you've got your proximity to the ocean and mountain ranges everywhere you look. You're just in fishbowl after fishbowl of mountain range, it felt like. These amazing lush valleys. And I think that it makes, I know that Portland's got a reputation for raining all the time. It kind of has to. I don't know how else you're going to grow this vegetation.
Yeah, I think we've got the fourth most days out. I think any major city, I'm quoting from the top of my head, not the most amount of rain, but just the most days where you see rain. Like you just see rain all the time. Right. It's kind of like the opposite of Colorado.
Yeah.
Where they just always see blue skies, even though you think of Colorado as kind of cold, but it's just because they don't have a lot of It's dry. I went to Colorado Springs for my brother's graduation, and it was just everything dried out. It was like being on an airplane. Like because you're so high up, you're basically up there, and then the humidity just gets. Yeah. It's like they've got a massive dehumidifier going at all times.
No, there's a real gentleness to Oregon that I don't feel. I love New Mexico. I love the Southwest. I love those states. I love the desert. I love Idaho. I love Wyoming. I really love the big wide open space.
There's a lot of snowbirds that will be coming from Arizona and New Mexico, parts of California, Texas, because they really like the summers here. You can know the blue skies, but your comment when we got to the Oregon coast was it's so beautiful, and I said wait for the rains.
Yeah.
There's 9 or 10 months of rain at the coast.
Yeah.
I think somebody like you who's an author who likes to write,
love it.
Who likes to tuck away. The rain is something that people that live here love the rain.
Yeah.
But there are people that they love the South just as much, and they'll go there for the winter to still get some of the sun.
I'll speak as a writer when I was still doing publicity, which I don't do anymore, but back in the day when there were book tours and what have you, Portland was a major, I never didn't do Portland, I don't think. And you've got some just storied bookstores here, of course. You've got Powell's, and you've got, storied bookstores.
Takes up an entire city block.
Yes, I love it. And it's a city of readers, absolutely, and writers.
Yeah.
But it is absolutely a city of readers, and you better come with your game, because people here actually do know how to critically read and read a lot. And I wonder if it's having Powell's and as a sort of heartbeat in the middle of the city. So I love that. I love that. The arts and sort of writing scene here is very rich still.
Yeah.
And there's wonderful tea houses and coffee houses everywhere. I mean, it really is a city conducive to that.
It is a city of creatives, and it's not
Yeah.
just, you know, the tech bros that come and they're creative on breaking into the new gadgets and stuff like that. But
Right.
there's painters, there's a lot of theater out here. My wife and I just went and watched a musical that was not even like one of the top playhouses, and they still knocked it out of the park.
Yeah.
I mean, I got my English degree in Portland, and just being able to go to like Reed College and take art classes there and listen to some of the eminent writers. I mean, I came and listened to you speak at Pal's Books once, and it was actually cool to see how many people showed up for it, and just how plugged in the community is to artists. Yeah, I've always sensed that, and even as back when I did street photography, and I'd go out, and it was just, I don't know, it's a city where not being like, you go to most cities, and this was my experience traveling in the National Guard and the military, you see people in uniform from all over the country. And I feel like the general rule of thumb is that you go into any ordinary city and the artist is the odd one out.
Yeah.
And you're kind of like, all right, you're thinking kind of differently. So like, you know, keep your thoughts to yourself. And that's very much like the East Coast, just business, like, you know, don't be too expressive. But with Portland, you're kind of the odd one out if you're like the East Coast city like person that just doesn't really think too much out of the box. You're like, that's weird. You're not thinking outside of the box, has been my experience.
Yeah. Because
every other city has been drastically different from that.
Yeah. Well put. Again. Yeah.
Got your thinking brains. There's a lot of people on our channel that are just kind of trying to pick where do I put myself, and where do I, you know, either raise a family. You've raised a family in
This would be an amazing city to raise a family. Sure. It's relatively inexpensive, and I say that with, you know.
But speak about your thought, because I mean, I had to planted from England and kind of dragged everywhere, and then you kind of get placed in Clackamas. What was, you don't have to get too personal, but what was your thought process of saying, I'm going to raise my kids?
I didn't have one. I mean, I just sort of, we left Zambia, and, you know, your uncle, my ex.
Excuse me.
We ended up, you know, his sort of home was Wyoming, so we just went where he was from. There was no thought process there. I have to say, having raised my kids out west, and especially in all that space of Wyoming, I can't imagine raising kids. I can't imagine raising a kids in a city. But if there was a city, I would have to. Weirdly, the two would be Portland or Madison, Wisconsin. For very much the same reasons. The nature, the fact that the neighborhoods feel neighborly, it feels like a safe city. Both cities feel safe, and just surrounded by bodies of water and magnificent forests.
My only experience with the Midwest was Missouri.
Yeah, no.
And it just sounds like misery for a reason.
Yeah, there you go.
It was just such, if anybody's from Missouri on watching the video, I'm sorry.
Did you see all of it?
I drove through a big chunk of it. Now that there are, I know there's states that you have to go to like a really random corner, like Wyoming. You've got to go to like a random corner of it. I feel like.
You know what? Here's the thing. No, here is definitely the thing. And if you are on land, you will fall in love with it. There's just no way you don't. So
we were talking about,
but it's a different kind of love, and it takes some doing. Like, I think when you're driving through something, there's an impatience, there's a discomfort. Yeah. It's not the way you're supposed to see it.
I was zipping down a highway, going highway speeds, just seeing.
Yeah.
And I think it was spring before it bloomed, so it's just a bunch of dead trees.
Right, and you're not taking into account whatever little, you know, the little froggy marshes and the, like on a micro level when you get into almost anywhere.
Yeah.
Listen, this is a continent. It's really...
I've never had the privilege of waking up on a front porch seeing the sunset rise over Missouri. So it's, you know, I guess there is a different type of...
Absolutely.
Pace you have to appreciate a place.
Yes.
Being in the Gobi Desert, like in Mongolia, for example, like you wouldn't expect anybody would want to live out there. But it reminds me of a conversation we were having where you could be in the most desolate places and you just slow down. And I slowed down and looked down at the sand, and I noticed the most intricate rocks. Like, even in the most like desolate, dry, like nobody would live there. There's places where like I think that there's beauty in any detail. Like craters of the moon, if you're going out towards Wyoming, you go out and you're like, there can't be much out here, and then you like slow down to read the history of what's happened to the land. And even in Pendleton, I used to drill out with the cowboys out in eastern Oregon. And you drive through that stretch of I-84 before you hit La Grande.
Yeah.
And you know that like you're kind of falling asleep because you're on the highway and everything's the same. But you do go out and camp in it.
It's beautiful.
And you wake up to one of the sunrises and you look around and you're like, I would say the one thing, actually, I'm gonna diss Portland for a second. The one thing that is limiting about Portland is we have so many trees. And somebody was actually asking about the skyline in the comments a while back. We don't have a city skyline per se, unless you're really going up, but we've got so many trees and hills that you actually feel fairly like you are like contained by green, which is lovely. Like, don't get me wrong, but to then go out and go into the desert or somewhere that's just you actually feel like you're living on the globe.
That's it.
Where everything just opens up and you realize how big the world really is. So Portland does, it can be a little bit like, even now, like we can see maybe 50 feet and then everything else is blocked by trees, which
I love.
We love it, but you know.
Yeah. You know, one of the things that I also love about Portland is drive in any direction, it's gorgeous, but you can get over the mountains and into the high desert and be in really the real sort of cowboy west quite quickly. Yeah. And it's spectacular going up the gorge, the Columbia Gorge.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, I still believe we live in the Wild West to a certain degree. I'm reading East of Eden by John Steinbeck, and he's contrasting the character moving from the East Coast to the West Coast and just how wild west the West Coast was back then.
Yeah.
Of like so much things could fly. Back then, the sheriff would clamp down on the East Coast and everything was tight. We've got a tight ship to run. But on the West Coast, they're like, well, as long as it doesn't affect me. Like,
do you think we've inherited some of that out west?
I think so.
You know, yeah, I do too.
Especially that as long as it doesn't affect me. That's very much like how people live.
Yeah, that's my experience of Idaho and Wyoming. And actually, one of the things we haven't brought up, but politically, you and I are not on the same page, I wouldn't say.
Pretty different.
But I do sort of love that out west, I don't feel this massive divide that I certainly hear I know it exists. I know that we're in a very divisive time. I absolutely understand that. But I think when you live out west, there is a way in which you've come in with, if you come in and really come in with it, you come in with the attitude that as long as it doesn't, frighten the horses, we're good. We can do this. And I think that that's rare. And I certainly find that in Idaho. And I find myself wanting to write about it, actually, and counter this myth that we're all at each other's throats, that we aren't able to sit at a table and find where we have love, certainly, and commonality, and really be grateful for each other.
Yeah.
And just know there's certain things we probably maybe won't talk about. Over dinner.
Well, I'm like more of a Churchill is my political idol, where I see things as like I'm like an extremist centrist, where I'll pull from everything, which also lets me like kind of see the viewpoints of everybody. I mean, I can get along with
Roosevelt myself.
Okay, there we go. So
cheers.
Yeah, cheers to that. And I would say that a lot of the West Coast, you could have, generally speaking, maybe not Portland proper, but most parts of the West Coast, even speaking from a cultural perspective, you can drive 20 minutes that way and be amongst the Second Amendment, gun-toting, if that's your crowd. And you can go 20 minutes that way and be amongst people that are very vocal about, I mean, Portland is a very vocal city when it comes to politics. And we have been cast a certain way, like on the headline news. I don't think it's a really accurate depiction, because people will take little sound bites.
It never is. It never is. I can absolutely attest. But that's sort of what I'm talking about. This myth of the divisiveness. It's not that it doesn't exist. It's not that we don't have our differences, and it's not that it's not that we don't have
contrasting ideas.
Right. Contrasting ideas, and also deep disaffection across the board. That is absolutely true. And day to day, people are civil. We just want to get on.
Yeah.
Cheers.
Cheers to that. Well, it's been a good time talking, Bo. We're gonna get back to hanging out with
our cute little
kids, your nephews and nieces.
Yeah.
So thank you for tuning in. Stay tuned for more videos on what it's like to live in the Portland area. I'm licensed in Oregon and Washington, so I can help you in either of those states.
Good one, Timmy.
If you enjoyed today's video and you are looking for more content like this, just subscribe below, leave a comment about what you thought. And of course, if you are moving up here, out here, wherever you are coming from, whether it's overseas, from California, Texas, New York, from Wyoming, Idaho, does not matter. I am here to give you the global, local perspective of what it's like coming here from another place So I am happy to sit down, chat with you one-on-one. I can text down below. You can shoot me an email. We can do a Zoom call. And of course, you can sign up for my Headhunters list to get a curated list of homes just for you. I am looking forward to next week's video. So stay tuned. Watch this video next, and I'll see you next week.